So, how many of you have heard that certain art resources are wrong to use? Now, I don't mean AI. AI is not the kind of resource I mean here, and that's not what I'm talking about, and we're not getting into AI here. We're not having that discussion in the comments section. There's all kinds of ethical issues with it, and honestly, if you want to know more about my views on it, or you want to have a discussion about it, I have another video talking specifically about AI, so go look at that video. Have the discussion on that video. This video is not what that is for. What I'm talking about is different resources or techniques, like in my last video I talked about tracing, or in this video we're talking about references. Especially because here lately, I hear a lot of people talk about how you shouldn't use references, and how you should only draw from imagination. Referencing is bad, it's a crutch. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that's correct. I think references are a good thing to use, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, before we get into that, though, let's talk about the art. The art in the background of this video is one of my stickers for my March Patreon sticker club. Say hello to Arlo. This is one of my characters from Trace, one of the past characters. And I really do love him. I think he's adorable. And I can't talk apparently. The theme for March ended up being tea. And I honestly really like how both of the stickers came out. But I especially like the teacups. The teacups were the most fun part to draw, honestly. And I really enjoyed it. Especially Arlo's. For his, I really like the idea of it being a more delicate and pretty type of cup, especially since I do think that he would like that kind of cup. He likes things that are pretty and delicate, so why not a pretty and delicate teacup? The relief of the flower and the fruit on the cup were also something I enjoyed rendering and designing. I thought that turned out really cute and really pretty, and I'm very glad that it turned out the way I did. It was very different from what I usually do. So it was something that I'm going to have to practice with more to get better at, but I really like it. Now, if you'd like to get this sticker or the other one, or if you want to participate in future polls to vote for sticker themes, definitely check out my Patreon link down below. I've already decided on the themes for April. The poll was a tie, and I ended up combining the two themes, so you'll start seeing those designs popping up soon. But now that we're past that, let's get back to the video. So, references. References are a wonderful and important resource, especially in learning to create. But recently, and this is something that has come up and gone away before, it's another cycle, because it seems like things being thing bad to thing okay again seem to be a constant cycle in the art community. But as it does, the ebb and flow has caused it to now escalate and become more prominent again. So I think that, much like tracing, some of this comes from bad actors using it in a more inappropriate and negative way. Now the rest of it is people going thing bad with little to no reason, because that happens every time somebody uses something bad, or uses something badly. So why exactly have references gotten misconstrued as bad? A large part of it has to do with an issue of people accusing anything even perceived as almost similar to something they have made to be plagiarism. It doesn't matter if there's proof. This comes up even when something looks similar by pure coincidence, or when someone deems something as too good for what they think somebody else should be able to do, whether or not they're a new viewer to that or not. And then, of course, accusations get thrown around. It doesn't matter if there's proof or not. This is similar. It makes people angry, so they start throwing the plagiarism accusation around. And now, this doesn't apply just to art either. Thing too good, especially, therefore plagiarism, comes up in regard to school, especially college. It can be a big issue with college. Now, it's one thing if a person, because I'm going to use this as an example, it's one thing if a person writing a paper doesn't cite their sources. But, like I said, I do have a story. So my fiance, when she was in college, had to write an episode analysis on a Netflix show. They watched it in class, and as happens in college, the assignment ended up getting put off until later. Procrastination is going to happen. It doesn't matter if you're a young student or an older student. Procrastination is sometimes just going to happen. And speaking as someone who was at one point a college student, it just does. Especially if there's a lot going on. So, it was put off until not long before it was due. But she did do it. She did turn it in right before it was due. And, well, she received an email from the teacher. In this email, they told her that they did a Google search and couldn't find anything similar online to what they had written. So they were going to, quote unquote, let it slide. Now, that sounds a little bit like an accusation of plagiarism, especially with the going to let it slide despite finding no proof. Apparently, the suspicion was caused by word usage like inhabitants, as well as giving a detailed breakdown of the episode. Now, first off, I feel like using, which I don't even think inhabitants is that big of a word, but I don't think using large vocabulary in a college level paper should really be something that's considered suspicious. And now that said, I've said it in my bad teachers video. I had a teacher one time accuse me of cheating because I used the word grotesque when I was in middle school because I read a lot. But I think especially in a college level paper, big words shouldn't really be a red flag. Especially because, let's be real, when you're writing a college essay, if you've got a word count to meet, you are using as many complex and big words and breaking things down to be as verbose as possible to meet that word count. But on top of that, giving a detailed breakdown of the episode was another cause for suspicion. Now, first off, with the big words, my fiance has always been big into reading and writing. We're talking for years before this. And at the time on top of that, she was nearly 30. I think by 30, a lot of people know big words. So she has quite the vocabulary. And again, this was a college paper. But the biggest thing was the episode breakdown. You know, like a ton of people don't have Netflix accounts. We have a Netflix account. She watched the episode again. It's not hard. But even with that considered, despite there being no evidence and a reasonable explanation about why these things were the way they were, she was still accused, without the teacher, of course, outright saying it, of course, of plagiarism. And this is very, very similar to what happens all the time in the art community. Now, let me be clear. Sorry, I had to adjust. But let me be clear. Heavily referencing, that can be a problem, especially if credit isn't given anywhere. There are instances of that happening, and that is usually where the bad thing lies. However, misconstruing it to reference as bad in general is not the answer. I understand that it happens a lot. There are a lot of instances of it, and it causes drama. Let's be real. How often does "they copied me" drama pop up in this community? Just because someone heavily referenced from someone else and decided not to disclose it. It happens all the time. But that doesn't make references bad. And I get it. Some people don't want others using their art, especially for heavy referencing. But some people don't want it used for referencing at all. And you know what? That's their right. It's their art. If they don't want people using it for reference, that's fine. It's theirs. But just accusing people of copying because something was similar does not mean that it was copied. That's not okay to just, it's similar, so copying. That's not what works. That's not what happens. Coincidence is something that exists. I know I mentioned that earlier, but it needs said again. Especially because anybody who writes and has common sense, I should say, will tell you there's not really any new ideas. There's not. You've got new ways to smash things together, but the root ideas are usually similar to something else that exists. And a lot of times people don't know it exists because coincidence exists. Sometimes things are going to be similar. And that's just because something is similar does not mean that we react without cause. And I think that accusations have been becoming more rampant because of the whole reference bad issue. The truth of it is, references in general shouldn't be discounted because they're a positive thing when used correctly. References are resources. In art school, for example, because while I haven't been to a specialty art school, when I was in college, I was an art student, references are a crucial part of classes. You have to gather them for your project, or you're referencing something specific that the teacher has given you in order to reference. They are a crucial part of the process and of the class. Even outside of school, references and their use can elevate a piece that you're working on to a new level. Especially if you need a reference or something to look at to help you figure out the mechanics of perspective, or a pose, or even what an object looks like from a certain angle. And quick note on poses, if it's a natural body pose, nobody owns a natural body pose. I see that a lot. Oh, they're posed similar to me, you copied me. That's not how that works. For all you know, they had the pose in their head and they looked at a picture of themselves that they had somebody take. That happens a lot if it's a body pose. Getting back to it, there are even situations in which it is absolutely necessary to use references to learn. A great example is anatomy, or, like I said, perspective. Even learning to draw certain things. Drawing and creating from imagination is great, and it's wonderful to do. It's wonderful to do. Do not get me wrong there. Do not misconstrue me there. But there are ways on which it can limit you, depending on your personal visual library, or things you've actively seen or experienced before. If you haven't experienced certain things, they're not going to be a part of your visual library if you haven't seen examples. And honestly, when you think about it, in a way, using your visual library, the way that you imagine things that you've experienced or seen pictures of, you're still referencing things because you're mentally referring to something that is familiar to you and therefore referring to something else. Looking at it that way, it's honestly nearly impossible not to use references, especially because art does not exist in a bubble. On top of that, art does not exist in a bubble because we as people do not exist in a bubble. Intentionally or not, our creations are influenced by things we see or experience, and that does include other art. It includes comics, cartoons, TV shows, anything like that, movies. Anything that we have seen before can influence our stuff, whether it's intentional or not. Even putting aside references being almost impossible not, using references being almost impossible not to do, it's critical for learning things like realism. Like it or not, if you're looking at something in the room and drawing it, you're referencing it. You are referring to it. You can't learn realism without referencing. Looking at and drawing anything around you, that counts. To learn anatomy, you have to reference books or pictures or other resources. Otherwise, you're not going to learn it correctly. Working in the industry, especially the animation industry, you also have to use references. I feel like that's a good example. Without them, and sometimes even with them, because it happens, consistency in character models and style is nearly impossible. The same goes for environments and details. Without references to know what is where or how specific things are supposed to be drawn in that style, you get major errors in continuity and consistency. And people do notice. And when I say people, I don't just mean other artists. I mean like lay people. People who are just the typical person off the street. That's where some of these wild, crazy conspiracies come from with art and reference. With, like, oh, this moved over here. Oh no, there's got to be something behind that. That's where a lot of that comes from. It's not an uncommon thing. But ultimately, what I'm getting at is reference bad is in itself a bad thing. They aren't bad. They aren't cheating, because I hear that a lot. And so long as you aren't directly copying without stating that it's a study or without crediting, they're a good thing. They aren't bad, but they can be used badly. Use them properly, but use references. Now, if you prefer not to, that's completely fine. You do you. However, if you want to use them, you shouldn't feel guilty or ashamed about it. It's not shameful. It's a tool. Now, honestly, I think I've rambled long enough about this, but I'm sure you get the idea at this point. I really am a big proponent for the use of references. I use them all the time. I may not post them on my canvas as I'm drawing, because I have a tendency to look at references on my phone while I'm drawing. It's just easier for me, because then I can zoom in on what I need to and still see my reference beside me. But thank you guys so much for listening to my rambles, because this still rambled even though I had a script. But you guys do get the idea. And I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on references down below. Do you think they're good? Do you think they're bad? Are you just kind of on them? Yeah, I'd honestly love to hear about it. Let's do some nice civil discussion down below. And thank you so much to my patrons, Inside Chaos, Salmon, and Creativa Artly. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!